they're always kind of doing this dance together. They're always mixing in, and sometimes we're, projecting out what it is that we're judging. That's often the case. But it's really how it impacts our relationship. Knowing what to do when you're on the receiving side of projection is going to really help to empower you. Part of self-empowerment is knowing how to not just work with your own energy and your own behaviors and thoughts and so forth, but it's also how do you interact and work with the others in your life as well.
Especially in the intimate relationships, between, us and our parents and our significant others and our children. And it's how we receive it, what we do with it, how we process it. Change the music, change the dance. And if we can do that, we change our lives.
Welcome to the Let's Be Real podcast, genuine conversations for authentic living.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm Lisa Allshafer, empowerment life coach and author of Journey with an Angel.
And I'm Sondra Pariser, health and wellness entrepreneur. More importantly, truth seeker, truth speaker.
And today's episode is about the dance of judgment and projection.
And before we kick it off, because all of these topics have been more beneficial for lots of you, but also just for me and for Lisa to better explore some of these little elements. And Lisa and I have been talking, this is our 22nd episode. And we love the feedback that we've gotten from so many of you, but most of it's coming through text messages, personal relationships. And I want to give a quick shout out to my nail lady. Wendy, love you. She has given me some great feedback about she really enjoys the consciousness piece and, the bigger, more esoteric, why are we here? And we've heard you. This has been a really incredible journey so far for Lisa and I to put together some, conversations and deeper, more strategic details of how all of you can incorporate some of these simple principles. They're simple principles, but they're not easy to implement. And so we're so grateful to all of you for what we've accomplished so far. And on our end, because of what we learned in this experience, we are very excited to put more content together. We've got some really exciting things coming down the pike that we get to bring to all of you. And even though we don't have the craziest, most abundant viewer base, we definitely have a loyal viewer base. So I just want to say thank you. And Lisa says thank you. And Lisa, do you have anything to add to that?
I'll say yet. We don't have the broad viewer base yet.
Yet. I mean, it's growing.
They're coming, yes. But we are, and I mentioned this at the end of the last podcast, that statistically, only 93% of people make it through episode 3 of their podcast. And out of those 93%, only 90% make it past episode 20. And so we are in the top, I said 7% before, but it's actually the top 1% of podcasters' success. So this is episode 22, and we're just getting started. We are figuring it all out. I mean, this is not our area of expertise, but we're bringing in experts and helping us to grow our podcast, which is why, when you can subscribe and like and share and whatever you can do for those of us who know us, or if you're just inspired to do so, it really, really helps us grow our podcast so we can continue to do this. Because we do it out of the goodness of our hearts at this point in time. Yeah. We'll always do it from there, but we also want to be able to reach more people. So we know that our efforts are really being utilized to the greatest potential.
Absolutely. And again, that comes back to this really neat journey. And I can't remember who I was talking to the other day, but we were talking about how all of the experiences that we have, I mean, you wrote a book. You have another book in the pipeline because we get these downloads and this inspiration to, someone needs to hear this. Someone besides myself, right? I live in my mind every day, 24/7, but someone needs to hear these stories. And, yes, it was a lady I met at the campground. She's like, you should really write a book. And she heard about that much and I said, of my life. And I said, my girlfriend and I put together a podcast, and I said, and it feels like for me, I'm writing a book for everybody to read. It's just coming in a podcast as opposed to, a real book. At some point in time, maybe that's going to be my case. But we're really here for all of you from the bottom of our hearts. And so with that, Lise, why don't we talk about dancing?
Dancing, projection and judgment. Woohoo!
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, these are really two complex psychological processes that are just part of our humanity. It is, where we are just, it's ingrained in us to judge and to project. So we're going to talk about specifically what those two things mean, a little more deeper in what they mean. And there's, positive sides and negative sides, especially to judgment. We hear judgment so negatively. Well, we want to address the negative judgments, but we also want to understand the difference between healthy judgment and unhealthy judgment. So, but ultimately, they're always kind of doing this dance together. They're always mixing in, and sometimes we're, projecting out what it is that we're judging. That's often the case. We'll get into that. But it's really how it impacts our relationships, what to do when you're on the receiving side of projection, because it's so prominent, knowing what to do when you're on the receiving side of projection is going to really help to empower you. And another thing also is, so much of it is about self-empowerment, but part of self-empowerment is knowing how to not just work with your own energy and your own behaviors and thoughts and so forth, but it's also how do you interact and work with the others in your life as well.
Oh man, and just even hearing you talk, I'm like, there's so much to this, and my description on what you just said, or how it plays in my life and everything that I've done and how I've grown, is and when you say dancing, right? Especially in the intimate relationships, between us and our parents and our significant others and our children. Change the music. How do you do that? How do you change the music? And this is probably one of the best things that we can talk about, because it happens to every single person. And it's how we receive it, what we do with it, how we process it, how we feel it. If we can change the way we feel about that projection coming on us, and boy, I could tell you where I'm at right now, but family is really a funny thing. But yeah, so how do you balance that? How do you understand what it is? Change the music, change the dance. And if we can do that, we change our lives.
Absolutely. And, so let's start with judgment. Let's start with how judgment impacts us, how it impacts others, and the difference between the healthy and the unhealthy. Mm-hmm. When we are in healthy judgment, we're in a really state of discernment. We're making a judgment call. We're judging what's the right or wrong thing to do here. We're making decisions based on our values, based on our experiences, and so forth. So that's healthy judgment. A judge in the judicial system, they're supposed to be healthy. Not necessarily, not if they're corrupt, but that's a whole other, level. But ultimately, in the pure sense of the word, they are to be judging what is the right thing to do here, and taking on all the facts and figures, hopefully without a lot of bias. But bias is just part of the human condition. Mm-hmm. So that's one. We want to keep that judgment intact and really get good at discernment, at really being able to make really healthy judgments in our life in that way. Where the unhealthy judgment comes into play is where we're just sending either someone or something or whatever it might be, unhealthy, negative, sometimes contemptuous energy, and holding someone or something in judgment. And part of that is recognizing that when we are in judgment, we are actually becoming a vibrational match to whoever or whatever we're judging, which is a whole nother deeper level of this that most people, don't talk about a lot. And that is what we're doing to ourselves when we're holding on to judgment. We are the ones that are paying the price.
I'm going to give you an analogy. So well, you know this, but I'll share this with everybody else. So in my personal deep quest to understand, all of this, I have landed recently, I'm taking Joe Dispenza's course on, it's his beginning course on understanding the mind, really unpacking the mind from a neurological perspective, a biological perspective, but also from the quantum realm as well, which is fascinating to me. And so he gave this analogy that I thought was really funny, but very true in exactly what you're saying. So a lady goes through life. She's been married for 20 years, kids, perfect life, perfect house. Husband comes home one day and says, "Oh, I'm leaving with 2 assistants and I'm moving to Timbuktu," and he's off. And the lady's for however many years wallows in the lack of trust, broken trust, betrayal, all of these low frequency energies that you and I have talked about, right? Seething hatred. How could he do this to me? And, someone comes up to her, 10, 20 years later, it doesn't matter the timeline. And here's this person, this lady, that is just let life beat her up because she chose to stand in this place. And really the judgment is on her, but she doesn't get it. So, 10, 20, however many years later, while she's still holding on to this, why did this happen to me? How could this have happened to me? Whatever this is, in this scenario, husband leaving. It changes and affects somebody, period, end of story. So then he uses another analogy. Another lady, she's in a marriage 20 years, they have kids, or whatever, kids, no kids, doesn't matter. And husband comes home one day and says, "I'm leaving now with the 2 assistants and the male guy. We're going to Barcelona." Mm-hmm. And I'm laughing. I'm like, okay, that's just kind of funny. And it's just an analogy, right? So this man leaves, this woman is distraught, and she sits there and she's trying to figure it out and trying to understand, how could this happen to me? And she's sitting in church one day and she hears this message of love and non-judgment, and she sits down in deep prayer and meditation and finds, and this is a story for me of the most painful relationship I've ever been in, asking for from something higher than myself, help, right? And she gets this epiphany and she realizes, like, oh, maybe I was responsible for this, and this, for him to not want to be there anymore. And she takes complete ownership over her life and does the work and heals the pain. And at the end of it all, wishes him love and abundance and a beautiful life. And what does she get in return? All of it. Mm-hmm. So a beautiful life. She meets the love of her life. They go on. They have this beautiful experience. And honestly, how true is that?
Yeah. Well, and that goes to a lot about the Finding Emotional Freedom Through Forgiveness podcast that we did a few weeks back.
Yeah.
It's going to set yourself free. Right. And so the same thing with judgment, like you're talking about. Remove the judgment. The one who's judging is paying the price. The loving one is the lucky one. The accepting one. Even if you can't get it to love, at least acceptance is a great great place to land in. If you've been holding someone, and also self-judgment. Don't forget about self-judgment, because when we're judging, whatever we're judging, we're locking into place. So here's where self-judgment can come in. And a lot of people, trying to lose weight or whatever it is, they're, or a behavioral habit like procrastination, or if they drink too much or they smoke too much or they, eat too much, whatever it is. And so what happens most is they're just in this consistent state of judgment towards what they don't like about themselves. Mm-hmm. And as they do that, it actually strengthens what they don't like about themselves. The procrastination pattern gets stronger. They gain more weight, or they can't lose the weight. It's that stubborn weight, right? Well, judgment's a pretty stubborn positional place to live in. Mm-hmm. If you are smoking, you've talked about that. Your
ad infinitum. I've talked about the cigarettes. I love the cigarettes, not anymore.
Yeah, journey into all that. But so when we're judging something about ourselves, we're also holding that in place. We're locking that into place. So it's really important to understand the price we're paying when we keep ourselves in judgment towards others, which is what we're talking about more today because of the projection, but also on how it affects our own progress and our own ability to achieve our true potential or let go of things that aren't serving us. It's let go of the judgment. You got to accept that this is, that you have gained weight if you've gained weight. Accept that you've gained weight, but now what are you going to do about it? If all you do is just throw that extra weight, some judgment, it's like going to McDonald's and ordering a Big Mac and a big large fry and whatever, and then saying, well, I'll just have water because I'm watching my weight. It's like, it's not going to make any difference. I don't even say diet stuff anymore because all that stuff has toxic stuff in it, right?
Yeah, right.
But ultimately, it's we're thwarting our own efforts on the things we want to change about ourselves by holding ourselves in judgment.
And it can be something, typically that judgment that we're talking about right now is not big. It's not ever, that judgment is never the elephant in the room. I'll give you an example. For me in my personal life, everybody knows I've been going through this back, hip, blah, 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 trying to heal my body naturally. So yesterday, I have to go back and see Barker. Love you, Barker. And I genuinely do from the bottom of my heart. And because my hip has been giving me grief. And I get this download 3-4 nights ago, and I'm like, oh. And I'm like, oh, it's not my tendon. I think it's bursitis. And it just comes in. I'm like, you're kidding me. All right, let's go back, see Barker. You have to know what you're dealing with. You can't ignore it. But that period between download and Barker yesterday, judgment, how could I be here? I've done all this work. I've done the stem cells twice. I've done the physical therapy. I'm doing the yoga. I've done the infrared. I've done the detox. I did the 21-day, and the judgment. So that's what I'm saying. It's not big judgment, but it was the mantra in my mind until I went and saw Barker yesterday. He's like, what you so angry about? I'm like, a lot of things, right? But it was, and we got to release it because he's just amazing at what he, and I trust him just like I trust you, like I trust Jason, like I trust my husband, like I trust people to break it down. You don't have to sugarcoat it for me. I'm a grown woman. I want it hard and fast and just give it to me straight. But it was these little judgments. And so I can say today, he did some work on me. We released some stuff. It was the first time I ever laughed through a session with Barker because of the irony of just let it go, let it, it is what it is. It's healing. It's a byproduct of having a problem in that area for a prolonged period of time. Stick with it. We're good. And then here's the gift of all gifts. I am officially off of all medications, no more bioidentical hormones. And I said this to him yesterday, and I said, okay, what do I need to do here? And he's like, you need to come in every 2 weeks. Let's get it. Let's fix this thing. I don't want to give you a cortisone injection. That's on the table. And I'm like, I don't want that either. And I said, well, doc, I'm down to just one more medication, and it's the thyroid medication, which interestingly enough is the one the pharmacy doesn't have. They continue to run out. I can't get a 90-day supply. So all of these, bioidentical, going through the menopause thing, the judgment, right? That's what I'm saying about these little judgments, are the ones that really have a tendency to run the show. So I said to him yesterday, I said, because I'm still doing the heavy metal detox, lots of supplements, lots of diet, lots of stuff going on. And he's like, come back in 2 weeks. He's like, go off the thyroid, see how you feel. Why don't you just think about how great your thyroid is working? And it's, you're removing the toxins, your thyroid's working, your hip is perfect, forget bursitis. I'm like, okay, let's play a game. And I woke up this morning and I'm at peace because the little tiny judgments, let it go. Look at the progress. We've talked about this.
Focus on what you want. Focus on what you want, not on what you don't want. Yeah.
Right. But it's all those little judgments.
Well, congratulations on all that progress, because that's a big deal. And you've obviously been working with your hip for quite a while, and hips have so much to do energetically with moving forward. So as you continue to clear what's going on with your hip, think of it that way, the more actual progress you'll make in moving forward, or feeling like you're moving forward in your life more so than you already are.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. I know. So I thought you'd get a kick out of that. So when we're talking about judgments, it's not big. There can be big judgments.
It's a mixture. Yeah.
It's a mixture, and some of this goes all the way back depending on where you isolate whatever the situation is. So if there's a trauma, we've talked about this, a trauma that happens, let's say in your childhood or in your marriage, let's say there is a broken marriage. Let's say, oh gosh, in my mother-in-law who is back in town, and it's lovely having her, the death of a daughter, right? These heavy traumas. So wherever that trauma is, or that emotional, you have better words for, what is it? An emotional.
It's like a pocket of negative energy that's living inside you.
Yes, yeah. And then when you cement it into place, that feeling will run your life.
It will direct some part of your life. And this is a quote from, I can't remember who it was, and it will, and you'll call it fate. Because whenever we're holding pockets of negative energy, which everyone is, because that's just part of being human, this whole self-discovery, this whole self-exploration journey that we're all on, this is so much of what this really is what our podcast is about, right? Is the human journey and self-exploration. And so when we are not addressing those negative pockets of energy, which can be laden with judgment, those pockets continue to grow. Think of the little onions I draw in so many of my experiences, right? So that it's like layered. So we're just adding on to those pockets of negative energy, and then they become a point of attraction in our life. So we start attracting in more negative energy because we're growing the negative energy within us. So we want to keep decreasing that negative energy. And so when we find those pockets of negative energy, they do not feel good. And that's why it's so important to know how to deal with negative energy. This is why I'm not a proponent of just positive thinking, because you will be so much more powerful when you know how to work with negative energy. You will be unstoppable if you know how to work with negative energy, not just try to put it over here and positive think it away. Yes, positive thinking is part of the process. We want to focus on the positive. We want to keep our, eye on the ball in our lives and things like that. But we also need to know how to address negative energy in a really empowering way, instead of saying, "Oh, I just don't want to deal with negative energy,"
Ooh,
or
that'll get you.
or judging negative energy.
Yeah, that'll get you stuck.
That's going to grow it. That's going to grow that negative energy.
Yep.
So there's a lot, beneath the surface that we need to understand in order to really overcome these things. So the next piece is exploring projection. So projection is where we can just project our thoughts, our feelings, our beliefs onto those around us. And when we do, it can look a couple different ways. So one way is, say somebody is insecure. So they might project that insecurity out onto someone whoever's in front of them in the moment. Maybe it's a client or a customer if you're in a business, or maybe you're in a business meeting or whatever it might be, or maybe it's with your own spouse or friend or whoever it is. And so we project that insecurity out onto others, believing that they see us as not good enough or incompetent or whatever. It's our insecurities, right? So it's not just what we feel, it's how we believe the world is seeing us. And that's projection. That's a form of projection. And you might have everybody, say in the meeting, let's just go to an example of you walk into a meeting and you're nervous and you feel insecure and you're going to be talking and all that, and you're going to think everyone's going to think you're not good enough and, that you're just incompetent. Well, first of all, you're already working against yourself and coming across confident because you're just not. But ultimately, the thoughts and all that stuff that's going on in your head of what you believe people are seeing you as, oftentimes isn't even close to the truth. We can really stretch this stuff pretty far. And so, but ultimately, the more we do that, the more insecure we become, because we see this as the truth. And this is a lot of times also when you can have people walking on eggshells around you, in general. I'm not, when I say you, I notice that when I'm editing, it's like when I say you, I'm not talking to you, Sondra. I mean, I'm talking to you, but I'm not speaking about you. I'm not
I
speaking
know.
about you.
I know
I
that,
just
but
use
good
that.
clarification for everybody else.
Yes,
It's you, it's anybody, it's
yes.
all of us.
You
Yeah.
all, you
Yeah.
all,
Y'all, we
y'all,
all.
right? Anyway, um, so then, you can, because if, especially if somebody has a lot of insecurity or whatnot, that insecure person can take things the wrong way because they have this filter, this distortion,
Well,
this
the
filter.
insecure person will 100% perceive an event that is not, that caters to their own insecurities.
Yeah.
That's the lens in which people will see an event, is through whatever lens, whatever insecurities that they have, right? Yeah.
Yeah. It could be anything. It could be guilt. It could be someone's laden with guilt. Laden's the word of the day. I keep using it. I'm not sure why I don't use it all that often, but it's coming up. So, okay.
Laden,
Yes,
laden with responsibility.
laden.
Laden.
Laden. Laden. Um,
Just get it out.
yes, exactly. So, it could be guilt. So you might see everyone also, it goes back to not enough. It's like you have done something wrong or you're not doing enough of something. Or if you say no to somebody, if you're a people pleaser, that they're going to think that you're not doing something right or that you're not being a good person or whatever because you're running around with a lot of guilt.
Yeah.
And so then that gets projected out onto others as well. But the other way it can come out is our own things that we judge about ourselves. We project out onto others and then we judge them in others. And you've said this, you've talked about this a lot, right? If you spot it, you got it.
I call it the law of mirrors. That's kind of been that was really understanding that however many years ago that Rebecca gave us the forgiveness book is when I really started connecting the dots of all of that. Like, oh gosh, you will create the life in which you judge, or the life in which however you think about something will come out, and it will become all that you see. And that's why, you and I are here to tell people this is the human experience, but to catch it and correct it and to understand it and to play around with it so that yesterday I can have an experience where I am now officially laughing at it, like, oh, this is funny. It's a process. It's a process. And I was thinking, because even our topic for today plays into that. And I use Alan because he's, again, my greatest teacher and he's my choice. So I don't have to be with anybody. We don't have to be with anybody. We don't even have to be with our adult children should they be, abusive. We talked about boundaries. It's so important. We don't have to be in relationship with our family if it's an abusive. We don't have to be anywhere. I don't have to be with Alan. I choose to be with him because I love him very much. And I understand that he is my teacher. And so that projection out. So, you and I've talked about this before. So when you said the dance, it's all a dance. We are all dancing to a particular song. And that song sometimes goes all the way back and to original traumas, unhealed traumas, and the judgment's the easiest thing to look at, because if something doesn't make you feel good, a thought, an emotion, a situation, a television show, you get triggered. I like that word. It's just
Activated, triggered.
activated, if something elicits a particular emotional response, and judgment is so easy to spot. Is that a good way to say it? Because when you're feeling that person did X, Y, and Z. And I will tell you, like in this journey with my body, with my health, with everything that I've been going through, like I still have like there's things in my life and relationships in my life that I very much am curious about. And I know it's up to me. And whether those relationships over time will fall away is the unknown, because I don't know, but I am still processing the law of mirrors, right? Gosh, I love Alan. Give me more. No, I'm just kidding. I'm good. But the judgment's the easiest thing to see. So, and it's only for us to heal and identify, where is it coming from?
Yeah. Well, and even the saying, if you spot it, you got it. What I believe about that saying is that if you spot it and you go into a reaction, if you go into an activation or a trigger, right? That's where you've got it. The more you are activated by something that you judge, that you see in someone else, the probability that it's living inside you continues to grow. It continues to get greater. And we can see, people doing all sorts of things. That doesn't mean we necessarily have it, but we can certainly recognize and observe, okay, they got something going on over there. It's to the degree that we feel judgment about it and are, reactive to it, is where we're now getting a little indicator, a little red flag. We better start looking in ourselves what that might be inside me, because I really don't want whatever I'm seeing in that moment, observing, in me. So, and that's usually the biggest hard pill to swallow when it comes to this work, is when we don't like something about somebody else and we're disgust about it or contempt about it or whatever it is. And if we really get activated by it, it's time to go, I better start looking at myself. And this is why this work becomes challenging for some people, because I don't have that. Okay, well, let's just take a breath, take an Andrew Huberman breath, right? And absolutely ground a bit. And I do this exercise in a lot of ways, because this is where we're starting to access the shadow inside of us, which is a whole nother complementary subject about this, because the shadow becomes shadow because it's when we first start to feel judgment and start to judge, is when the shadow is born, because the shadow is born from judgment, the shadow side of us, the parts of us that we want to hide away, the parts of us that we don't want people to see, or the parts of us that we don't like about ourselves, or can really be aggressive, or it can show up in many different ways, but can really come out in a negative way. And so this is where that law of mirrors, the law of reflection, comes in. And what we don't like out here is where we start to see what we don't like about ourselves. But then that's the first step in healing it. You have to be able to see it in order to heal it, have that self-awareness. But here's, a famous little kind of way of exemplifying this is when you're pointing your finger outwards, there's 3 fingers pointing back at you.
A saying that has lasted the test of as long as I can remember.
Yes.
And will continue to last. Yeah, it's so true. And where your focus goes, your energy goes, and what you focus on expands. There's a handful of, and this is, something I've said to Alan, my husband, since, my gosh, I don't know how long he's been training on this. Since he was 21, maybe since he was 18. What you focus on expands. And while he's used that in business to really cause people to understand, if I'm focused on the things I don't have, you're going to create more of the things that you don't have. If you're focused on, here's where I'm going, then you got to back yourself into the activity, but you focus on, there's my end goal, and just keep that focused. Like, this is what I need to do in order to get where I want to go, and not focus on all the things you don't have. But it's all the same, right? It's the law of reflections. It's the law of mirrors. It's what you point at, 3 fingers pointing back. And it's a very simple principle, but it's something so important. And that is I think, at least for me, and I think for a lot of people, it's an easy thing to look at. Because when you're saying, oh, that person, anytime that person, anything, end of story. You're going to create it. You are creating it by judging it. By judging it, you create it. By talking about it, you create it. By focusing on it, you're creating it. And so what's the easy hack? The easy hack is to go, ooh, what am I putting out there? And again, like I said before, it's the little things. It can be the big things. I mean, honestly, if you're really struggling with, a traumatic event way past in your life, well, you got to go back to the tree. I mean, that requires work. And you and I've said this from the beginning. When someone really does have a life full of trauma, you need someone to help you through it. And, whether that is a personal life coach, whether that's a professional therapist, depending on your situation, maybe a psychiatrist, or maybe it's some kind of Joe Dispenza type of Tony Robbins, T. Harv Eker, some of these other people that have created a platform for people to do a self-help type of analysis. But here keep it simple. Start to figure out, what are you pointing at? And then it just, you even having that awareness to know that you are changing that. And that's the progress, right? We need to pat ourselves on the back for progress. I mean, anyone listening to our podcast at this stage in the game, you genuinely have a yearning to find peace. Like, that's what we're all, I think, striving for.
Yeah.
To love, to be loved, to peace, to not have all this judgment, the sticky stuff.
And when you first are really becoming self-aware of your judgment, it's just do just that, like you said, make it simple, and just pay attention. Just take one day, 24 hours, and just make a note, whether it's a mental note or you actually really want to get into this and make a physical note of what you judge. Yourself, other people, someone because they have, maybe purple hair, I don't know, whatever someone might judge,
Yeah.
But also what you're doing is you're also saying, gosh, why do I want to spend that kind of energy on somebody else's hair color or whatever, it's kind of a silly thing, but, to judge. But ultimately you want to catch those silly things. You want to catch those things that make no difference whatsoever in your life.
None.
And yet we go and judge. Maybe someone's short on change at the the cashier in front of you. It's like, are you going to allow that? Not that people use change much anymore, but I'm dating myself. But that there's just all these little things that you can catch. Those are the easier ones to catch and correct.
Yep.
And say, how is judging this person I don't even know and will never see again going to impact my life? Well, right now it's impacting my life because it's lowering my vibration. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, and there's countless examples, and one that just popped into my mind because I think that it is absolutely worthy is in business. And I'm just going to try and say this a little bit cryptically so I don't cause any attention to anybody. In my business, in our business, mine and Alan's business, we happen to be spotlight people. When we go into, any type of a, corporate function, all eyes on us. So I have very much a sensitivity for the up and coming people, the people that are succeeding, that are newer to the business. I'm 20 plus years, Alan's 33 plus years. Like, I've already been through it. I've gone through it, so I know how it feels. But to view it through, oh, I see, this person, there's a ton of shade coming at her or him for whatever reason. And when I'm watching it crossfire, this person saying this about that person, and you can get into some real catty stuff. And I will say there's a group of people that are new and very, very successful that I'm watching just throw stuff at each other. Sorry, everybody. But it's painful to watch. It's painful to watch because it's judgment coming at, whereas who is that serving? And I was on the phone with a girlfriend of mine who a lot of these up and coming people in my business are social media influencers. It's something I don't know much about, but I can understand. Hundreds of thousands of followers. These big groups have created, and they came in that way. Talk about shade. You know, it's one thing I've chosen never to do is to discuss divisive topics out there for the masses, because my goal is not to create division. It's to create unity. And how do you do that in a world that is focused on the most divisive conversations? And so there's all this stuff going back and forth. To see it from the outside and look in is like, whoa, okay. Can I just get in there and clean that up for you guys? I can't do it, but I feel what they're going through, because it's so much bigger than the comments throwing back and forth. You know, she's got colored hair, or is too fat, or too skinny, or too perfect, or too whatever. There's so much of that going on. And I'm like, you know, those are, so let's say you're at a conference and you're sitting in the room and you're watching someone up on stage. For me, I give grace for the person who gets up and starts talking to people. I will always bless them and love them, because it's so hard to get up there and talk. And so I grace them. But there's all this judgment coming from a lot of people because of the insecurities that they have. So, you know, next time you're in an environment like that, you know, try and understand where that person that's up there feels. And that judgment, should you be that person throwing shade, is yours and yours alone. And I think in the world of this social media stuff, people don't realize that, you know, Lisa, you're a human being. I'm a human being. Well, we don't have these radical followings if that happens, and when that, I think it's a when that happens, just because of this transit that we're in, where people are desperately trying to understand things like judgment. But to throw shade, you know, whether it's on Twitter, I see it, Twitter, right? You can get caught in it because there's all these anons. There's a human being behind that. And I've watched this happen with some of my social media influencers too. You know, there's a lot of shade. So as we can just be gentle.
Yeah, and so that really goes well into the next piece, and is, what do you do when you're on the other side of the projection, when you're the receiving side of the projection? Because, you know, people feel it. People feel when they're being judged. It's got a distinct feeling to it. And I remember sitting in a seminar, actually, and there was a gal who was in that seminar, and we were co-coordinators, but she did not want me to be a coordinator of that seminar. And oh my gosh, I didn't know I was walking into a lion's den. That's what it felt like. But anyway, so I'm sitting in where we're actually live in the seminar, and all of a sudden I could just feel her stare piercing through me, and it literally felt energetically. I mean, I felt like a knife going through my head. It was so focused and concentrated and strong coming at me. Ooh. And it actually activated something within me. Of course, this whole seminar was about, you know, transformational work, so it was the perfect place for it to happen. But it was so interesting because it was like a physical dagger going through me. And that's, you know, that's where the saying is, you know, you feel the daggers coming at you from somebody. And I was literally getting a dagger coming at me. And it started to activate.
If I was there, I would have gotten in that ninja fight.
Yes, well, yeah. What it did is it activated something deep within me because it was so powerful. And I would say she's a pretty powerful person. I would say she's a powerful person. Now we're friends. Well, we don't talk anymore, but we became friends after that. We resolved that, just to say that. But that experience of it, I had all this stuff coming up that was just, I couldn't hold it. I don't know how long ago this was. It was probably 20 years ago or so. And so I had to literally raise my hand and say, "Excuse me, but I need some help here." And then that's when the person who was running the seminar stopped and actually processed me, because I was just, if you've ever seen a cartoon where they can't speak and they're kind of trying to get someone's attention, that's kind of how I felt, because I was just like, wow, I have got a ton of energy coming up within me right now, a huge pocket of energy that's coming up as a result of this experience. And so then we processed it, and it was like it was me getting processed in a room full of people, but that's fine because I didn't know what else to do.
Right.
And then it happened, but it was from judgment, and I was on the receiving side of it. Anyhow, so that was really interesting experience. But when you find yourself on having someone either throwing daggers at you or throwing shade on you, or you're on the other side of projection, it's like, are you, does it feel like someone is accusing you of something that they're actually doing? Does it feel like they're putting words in your mouth or intention behind your words that aren't there? And that's a big one. That one actually exists a lot in our communication, is we are placing intentions on someone that's the intentions aren't that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your intention is to hurt me right now. Well, no, my intention isn't to hurt you. My intention is to help you, actually. But, so this is where we can start walking on eggshells and things like that. But you want to really kind of recognize when there are certain signs of you being projected on. And so I'm going to kind of we can go through some of the list of this, but the person projecting is coming at you with accusations, blame, or aggressive behavior. So they're not coming in having a conversation anymore. It's more of it's more aggressive, right? And these accusations, this is where their finger is pointing at you.
Literally.
They're not paying attention to the fingers that are pointing back at them.
Right. Literally. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They don't want to take any responsibility for their own actions or thoughts. This is another place where you can find projection when you're on the receiving side of it, is that like all the responsibility is all feeling placed on you. They want to avoid talking about whatever the actual experience is because they just want to keep the focus on you. And this is a big piece of it. They want to keep the focus on you. They don't want to put the focus on themselves.
No responsibility.
Yeah. They want to avoid, they are evasive and indirect when you call them out. So if you do call them out, that's where they start to, do a little, what is that, when that happens, there's a saying for that.
They're dancing and not to your
Well, they're
song.
dancing, yeah, but they're talking in circles or they're talking indirectly. They start to move into other subjects because they're starting to squirm out of.
Deflection. Deflect.
Yes,
Or
deflection.
misdirection. Ooh,
Yeah.
magician.
Yeah. They have a strong need to be right, and in doing so are trying to make you wrong.
I've experienced that
Yeah.
many times.
They want the upper hand. They don't hear what you're saying because they must hold on to their own position. So if someone's projecting, they're probably not going to be really receiving because they're already tuned out. They can't hear conflicting information to what it is that they're projecting. So they just try to keep power of the conversation or keep power of whatever that is and try to keep you in a lower position. And then they just won't let it go. They are like a dog with a bone. They're a dog with a bone and they just won't let it go. So these are just some signs.
And by the way, this everything that you just said kind of piggybacks off of our boundaries episode.
Yes.
Because what we're talking about right now is judgment coming at you, projection, emotions, and these are heavy, dark. When this is happening, it's typically in a very close, intimate relationship, whether it's a deep friendship or a parent-child or a grown child or spouse, or these are really threaded. And when this is happening, I'm sure you're going to get to it. And I've experienced this. And for me, when this is happening, the best thing you can do is not to engage it.
Yeah, we're going to have a whole list of things.
Okay,
yes.
good. Because I'm like, I'm activated. No, I'm not. I'm just kidding. I'm not activated. But yeah, you need to, I'll let you take what to do. What do you do?
So these are first you got to recognize the signs that you're being projected on. And then you're going to probably start to feel a little confusion, like something's off. So now part of this is so much about self-awareness. But here's the thing, that you don't want to do is take the bait. You don't want to take the bait because you are being baited into
An
their projection.
explosion.
Now, when this is really severe, this is called gaslighting. Okay, which is the gaslighting is where it's actually, the term came from a movie where the husband was trying to make the wife think she was crazy. Okay, so this is used a lot when it comes to
What movie was
narcissists.
that?
Gaslight.
That was the name
That's
of the
the name
movie?
of the movie. Yeah, gaslight.
Oh,
Gaslight or gaslighting, one of the two. Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Name of the
And-
movie. Got its name
yeah.
from a name of a movie.
It's
Okay.
an old movie. It's an old black and white movie. I've never watched it. I'm just aware of it because I've, looked into gaslighting.
Right.
I think a lot of people have been on the receiving side of gaslighting. But gaslighting is definitely more of a manipulative. A lot of people are projecting. They don't even know they're projecting. So there's that. But sometimes it is on purpose. It is to manipulate others. And so that's why narcissists are really known for projecting, which is a form of gaslighting is a form of projection. And so they're trying to make you feel like you don't know what you're talking about, or you're crazy, or you're wrong, or whatever the case might be. And so now that's a heavier duty type of projection that we're talking about. But it's also not taking the bait. Because especially if you're a people pleaser, especially if you just have a strong need to be approved of and liked, you're going to be sitting there like a fish out of water, like, I don't know what to do with all this energy. So that's why this subject is so important, because if you find yourself on the receiving side from subtle to intense,
Extreme, yeah.
you want to know what to do in that. And the first thing you want to make sure you're not doing is taking that bait. So the best way to handle it is to look for these signs within yourself, and that is, do you feel confused? Because if you do, by hearing what we're saying right now, that's going to be a little indicator. Now, not just confusion in general, but in the case of when you feel like what you're being said, whoever's saying something to you in the moment, like, wait a minute, that's not what I said, or that's not what I did, or that's not what I meant, or all that kind of stuff. So you're going through this little process internally that feels confusing. Do the things being said make any sense to you?
There's
So
that confusion. The confusion,
Yeah.
right? Do they make any sense? Does this make, where's
Yeah.
this coming from? Ding, ding.
Ding, ding. Yes, this doesn't make any sense. Why are they
Doesn't make
saying
any
that?
sense. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you feel a need to defend yourself because they don't let up?
Ding, 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 ding.
Okay.
That's
The
the
moment-
don't engage, don't engage,
Yeah.
don't take the bait.
Yeah. So the moment we feel defensive, which is, again, this is a skill.
Yeah.
Because when someone's coming at you, to not get defensive is a higher end skill.
Because if you're really in that situation, they want you to engage.
Yes.
And by not getting defensive, I promise you this much, they will get far more in your face. They'll get louder. So yeah, skill set, right? That's why I said, I'm like, for me personally, anytime that happens is just literally remove myself from the situation. I gotta go to the bathroom, right? Or misdirection, right? Like, and just remove yourself from the situation, because when you do that, they want to have you feel gaslighting, perfect example. They want you to engage. They want engagement. And your job is, you will get defensive. We are human. It is so hard. Don't engage.
Yeah.
Just walk away. Do something.
Well, it's not always walk away. It may be walk away in some circumstances, but not always. It's not just one thing to do
Just
with
don't get
what's
defensive.
happening. But definitely, you want to be able to stand in it and still stand in your power. Okay? But there might be times where walking away is the right thing to do. But the real
But when you
power
get
comes,
defensive, don't get defensive. Because if you can engage that without, yes, then you stand in your power.
yeah.
Yeah. But where are you at? Do you remove yourself because you can't control it? Or can you?
Right. So, but that's the thing, is we want to be in a place where we are in control of ourselves. So if we're leaving because we don't feel like we have control, now we're acting from fear.
True. Very, 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 very true.
Is that
Yes.
very true? Yes.
Very
So we
true.
want to, but see, so if we're walking away, we want to make sure we're walking away in our power,
Yep.
not that we're walking away in fear. There might be times where the person that we're talking with is our spouse or it's our child. And so walking away might be a saying of, no, well, I'm not going to listen to you. So
Yeah.
again, there's so many variables. There's
Yes. Yes.
and this is intricate stuff. It's complex. And so that's why by trusting in yourself and kind of knowing these signs and understanding what's going on inside you is so important so that you can continue to build on this skill set so that you're making the right decision for yourself, which will ultimately be the right decision for the other person too, especially if
I'm
there's
still
somebody
stuck
in
on
between.
gaslighting. I'm like, don't engage. Don't engage. But then there's all these other little details of
But it
the
might be a child.
reality.
Might be your child. You can't
Yeah,
let
no,
go
you
of your
can't
child,
walk. Yeah,
right?
you need to, especially with children. Doesn't matter, adult children, young children, any kind of child. They need you to lead.
You either are not engaging or you're engaging in a healthy way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got clarity on that. Thank you. So true.
Yeah. So, but another thing is you might, you might feel like you're being made wrong. Again, this is all, it's mixed in with blame and all that kind of stuff. Or do you feel they aren't hearing you or understanding you? Again, this is a big one because once the ears are shut off, it's just really difficult to communicate anymore. So that might be a time where whatever you're saying, they're just not hearing. And so that might be a good time to say, you know what? Let's just kind of take a break and maybe
Come back to it.
go for a walk and let's come back to this in like 15 minutes, or let's come back to this in an hour, or let's come back to this after the kids go to bed or whatever. But part of this is really knowing what to do if you're being projected on is following your intuition. Because it's not a pat answer. It's going to be different answers depending on the relationship, depending on where you are at, depending on where they are at, depending on how intense the projection is. And because remember, a lot of people don't know they're projecting. When you're in a gaslighting situation, yeah, you're probably in a relationship that's not going to be healthy if they are more in that level of projection. So, but a lot of times people get sucked into that way of being gaslit on. They don't see it coming because for narcissists, it's really, they come out charming in the beginning. They come
Oh,
out
yeah.
so, charismatic, and you start to fall into that kind of a spell, if you will. And then you start to go in, and then it starts to go, okay, now that I've got them, now I can start to
Play around with them.
Play around with
Manipulate them. Yeah.
exactly. So that's you have to really look and see what are the ways and the types of relationships you're in where projection might be occurring, whether it's gaslighting or just more subtle stuff, or they're just projecting their insecurities onto you, whatever it might be, and recognize that when you recognize that it's not about you, that this isn't about me, first you got to check and see, is there some validity to what they're saying? Got to check in, always make that check in.
Self-awareness.
But if it's not, and you recognize this isn't about me, that might be a situation where you recognize it's time to leave. It's time to really disengage because it's just not, there's no communication really happening in that moment. And I'm just allowing myself to be abused or allowing myself to be, mistreated to whatever degree. But if it happens if you're in a relationship with someone, then it's maybe giving them some space to really get it out, whatever. And you're just listening without getting defensive. And you're just listening and letting them kind of project or whatever until you feel they've kind of got it out of their system. And then you can come back. And then I hear you.
And that's called holding space. Sometimes you're holding space. Sometimes someone really needs to just let it go. Usually it's a close, intimate relationship. And there are times where the world around you is getting so, and you just gotta, and okay, so on the receiving end, if you're on the receiving end, self-awareness, is this person I care so much about just needing to just vomit all over somebody? Can I do this? Yeah, sure. Most, hold space.
Yeah. Which is why it's so important not to take things personally. Because the moment you've taken the bait when you take things personally.
Yeah.
And that's why we go defensive, and that's why we now are starting to dig ourselves out of our own hole that we are creating by taking it personally.
Right.
But this takes work. I mean, what we're talking about right now, this is not easy stuff. This isn't easy.
No.
And it's not even simple because there's so much complexity to it. But you have to start somewhere. You have to start somewhere. Well, you don't have to, but if you want to be more empowered, you have to start somewhere. And that is really paying attention to these signs, right? And then how you're feeling when you're in the midst of the signs that you're recognizing. And have some go-tos, especially if there are relationships in your life that are consistent that you want to keep in your life. Well, you got to know how to deal with this stuff. If you want to have a healthy relationship and you don't want to be the fall guy or gal
Right.
all the time.
Right.
But if they're people that maybe are best to get out of a relationship with, maybe you're in a relationship with somebody who's a narcissist and it's really not a healthy relationship and it's abusive or whatnot, and you're really getting that, because mental manipulation is oftentimes worse than physical, abuse. Because it just
Almost all the
up and down.
time.
Yeah.
In my experience, and I've been abused in every different direction, and I find that the emotional abuse is much more challenging to identify, to shift and change, right? It's that physical abuse when it's coming at you that's easy to go. It's so overt, you can't really miss it, right? The emotional abuse gets really, really threaded. So yeah, I know it's layered, it's challenging, but even these simple tips, they really are simple, but they're very complex at the same time.
And some of these relationships, it may just be better to let go because they're just not serving you. And then that's its own process. And then they're probably going to try to pull you back in because that's what narcissists do.
Oh, and I'm
Back in.
you back in.
Make you think
Don't
everything's
do
okay.
it.
Yeah. But remember, you can't change other people. You can only change how you respond to them. And this is part of this empowerment, is how to best respond to challenging communication, to challenging relationships. But the more you minimize all the things we're talking about, the more empowered you will actually be.
Amen. I think that's the best point of all. So little tips and tricks to live our best lives, our happiest, most peaceful lives, and to dance a fun salsa-y dance.
That's right.
Right?
Make them fun dances, not
Make them fun dances. Absolutely. Well, thank you everybody again for your time, and we appreciate spending it with you. And we love the comments and the feedback, no matter how they come back to us. So thanks again. And Lisa, thank you.
We'll see you next time.
All right. Next week, episode 23. Over now.